Hello, welcome to another video from the conscientious biologist, Ben Gallagher. This one's the second one in the disease unit, but remember from the last video that I've split non-communicable disease into two, just so it's two smaller, more digestible chunks for you guys to get your head around. There's nothing difficult to understand in these, and there's nothing conceptual. There's no key processes to get your head around. It's just a lot of information dumped on you in one go. So the last one was an overview of non-communicable disease. And included cardiovascular disease. This one just looks up smoking and diseases associated with smoking, and then we look at cancer. It's from the GCSE specification, and as always, please do subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. Good luck. Okay, so we've just looked at all the risk factors associated with diet and exercise. Let's now link to smoking. We'll try and speed up a little bit on this because smoking, I'm sure you've all seen it. You know what we're talking about. We're talking about cigarettes, cigars, pipes, things like that. But they're all from tobacco. Tobacco is a plant. This is a tobacco plant. When it's dried out, it can be rolled up and processed into those things. So we're talking about smoking plant leaves. Now, the plant leaves themselves may not be that bad. We eat loads and loads of plants, but it's the burning it, the smoking, the stuff that really creates the problems. So what we're going to do, we're going to look at the four main bad things in cigarette smoke that can lead to lots of non-communicable diseases. So we've got nicotine, carbon monoxide, tar, and carcinogens. We'll explain what carcinogens is in a minute. Let's start with nicotine though. Nicotine is a problem because it's the addictive part. People who smoke tend to keep on smoking and become addicted to it. So having an addictive substance in cigarettes is bad because it keeps you coming back again and again and again to that risk factor. But not only is the nicotine addictive, nicotine is actually a poison. Tobacco plants produce nicotine naturally to kill predators and pests that are eating them. So if you've got insects that go and try and eat tobacco plants, they won't be able to eat much of it before nicotine poisons them and they die. It's not going to have a massive effect on larger herbivores that might come along, but if you've got a bigger herbivore that comes along and starts trying to graze and eat lots of tobacco plants, it's certainly going to make them very sick and it might kill them. And in fact, you only need very, very small amounts of nicotine for it to affect children, small humans, because they're much smaller, they can't take as big a doses. So that second-hand smoke that smokers breathe out in enough of volume in a smaller space could be enough to actually poison a child. So nicotine itself is quite a dangerous thing, but its main worry is that it's addictive. Carbon monoxide is the big worry for me. This is something that's always terrified me, because carbon monoxide binds irreversibly, meaning it can't go back, to hemoglobin in red blood cells, which blocks its ability to carry oxygen. Now remember back to the circulatory system lessons. Think of hemoglobin, and it's a protein, remember, because proteins do everything. Hemoglobin, try and think of it like a cup, okay? That hemoglobin in the red blood cells goes to the lungs, fills itself up with oxygen, goes around the body and empties out its oxygen, goes back to the lungs, fills up again. What carbon monoxide does in the lungs when you breathe it in the cigarette smoke is it goes into the cup, into the hemoglobin, but glues it up, fills it up and stays there. It like glues itself in there. Well, now that cup, the hemoglobin, goes around the body, it's got no oxygen to give out, but when it gets back to the lungs, it's still full. You can't get anything more in there. So effectively, that hemoglobin molecule is now useless. It's been made redundant. Now, if you're smoking lots, taking in lots of carbon dioxide, blocking all of your hemoglobin, then you're not going to be able to carry oxygen around your body. So less oxygen going to your cells means they'll do less respiration, which means your whole body's going to get tired, or effectively you will suffocate. It is suffocation, it's starvation of oxygen to all the cells in your body. So carbon monoxide poisoning is a terrifying thing, okay? So carbon monoxide for me is one of the most dangerous things that's in cigarette smoke. Tar is the other thing, and when I'm talking about tar, I'm literally talking about this. I'm talking about the same stuff that goes down on tarmac on the roads. There's lots of it in cigarette smoke. If you were to smoke through a tissue and then hold the tissue up, you'd literally see the brown tarry substance that's been caught on the tissue, okay? Don't smoke through tissues though, don't smoke at all. But if you smoke through tissues, you're obviously adding chemicals from the tissues as well. But yeah, it's tar. So think, if that's going into your lungs, it's going to block up your lungs. Here's a picture of some lungs that had to be taken out of a smoker who died. You can see they're all black and full. It's literally like someone's poured oily tar down your throat and you've choked on it and drowned in it. Tar blocks airways and can damage the alveoli where the oxygen exchanges, and it leads to something called chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD. That is a key term that you need to know. It's a key non-communicable disease. Chronic, meaning it's kind of there the whole time, it's really bad. Obstructive, it obstructs the air coming in. Pulmonary, remember, pulmonary is anything to do with the lungs, pulmonary artery, pulmonary vein, and it's a disease. So what we're talking about is you drown in the tar inside you, and you've put that tar inside you by smoking. So you're drowning in that own tar. And of course, remember, link this to the other ones, link this to carbon monoxide. You've got fewer hemoglobin molecules that can carry the oxygen. You've got less alveoli to absorb it because most of them are blocked with tar. So this is why people who smoke generally get really tired and out of breath doing anything, because they simply can't get the oxygen in to do respiration to get the energy. Carcinogens are a whole bad thing on your own. Carcinogens are chemicals that cause cancer. We're going to be coming on to that next, so I don't want to worry about it right now. But a couple of extra points associated with smoking. This one first. Smoking's very closely linked to increased blood pressure. We talked about that in the last one, which is very serious and dramatically increases the risk of fatal conditions. We talked about that on the last slide. But this thing as well, this terrifies me and really angers me actually. People who smoke during pregnancy, because smoking during pregnancy has serious implications for the baby's growth and survival. Because if the mother is pregnant, has a baby inside her, the baby is entirely dependent on the mother's blood. So the mother's blood needs to deliver the oxygen and glucose to that baby so it can do respiration, so it can grow. Well, if the mother's hemoglobin is blocked because of smoking, she's got less oxygen going around in her blood. That means there'll be less oxygen going to the baby. Baby, as it's growing, the cells, the embryo, the fetus, are going to be able to do less respiration, have less energy for growth. So babies born to mothers who smoke tend to have very low birth weights, tend to be very, very small. Or, very, very sadly, miscarriages can occur because the baby hasn't grown. Or they die in infancy very, very early, very, very young. There's a lot of deaths associated with the babies of mothers who smoked during pregnancy, and that's because of these things that are in cigarette smoke. Okay, that's a lot more information on here, so take a screenshot of that one. Again, it's just a case of learning the information. Let's move on to cancer though, which is the last slide that we've got. Okay, so cancer, you'll remember from the first slide, I put cancer in a group all on its own because it's kind of different, it's kind of unique to all the other stuff that we've talked about. Let's look at the key facts behind this though. So cancer, key things you have to know: eukaryotic cells multiply by mitosis. Remember that. Mitosis is for growth and repair. So it's going on all the time in your body. The speed at which cells multiply though is tightly controlled by your DNA, because you don't want your cells just growing and growing and growing. You don't want them growing in one place faster than another place. So you've got specific genes that control how quickly mitosis can happen. And sometimes those genes kind of activate and go or grow quite fast, and that's when you have growth spurts. So you grow a lot during puberty, you grow a lot when you're a baby and an infant. It then slows down. You don't really grow anymore once you get to kind of age 20, 21. So these genes for mitosis slow right down. Obviously, when you've got injured, you need to repair the damage. If you've got a big cut or something, you need to repair that. So the DNA activates these certain genes to say, oh, do mitosis quickly to fix this damage. But you need them to be regulated very tightly, and these genes are called oncogenes. Okay, the study of cancer is actually called oncology because of these oncogenes. So it's these oncogenes that control the speed of mitosis. But if an oncogene mutates in a cell, it can lead to uncontrolled mitosis. That will make more cells, which then in turn make more cells, and so on and so on and so on. If you remember back from the meiosis lessons with a diagram like this, the 1 becomes 2, then 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, and so on, until you get a big ball of cells. Okay, and because they've replicated so fast, they haven't had time to specialize and differentiate. So these balls of cells are just a random lump of undifferentiated or weirdly differentiated ball of cells. And that's called a tumor. Now, I'm sure you've all heard of a tumor and how it links up to cancer. So a tumor is a key part of a cancer. But a tumor is just your own cells that multiplied far too fast, that made a ball of cells somewhere in your body. Now, a tumour in itself can disrupt and damage the organ around it, which can lead to death. But there's two main types of tumour you need to know about: benign tumours and malignant tumours. Now, we're going to look at malignant first, because a malignant tumour is so called because cells from that tumour, from the ball of cells like this one, can break off and form secondary tumours elsewhere in the body. Because think, if that one original cell up there was the one that had the mutation in its oncogene, then all of the cells that come after it will have that mutation in the oncogene. So any one of those cells could break off, float off around the body, land somewhere else, and continue multiplying, forming a new ball of cells, which would be a secondary tumour. So a malignant tumour or malignant cancer is where it can spread all around the body, make tumours all over the body, disrupting lots and lots, considered as cancer. When you have a malignant tumour, that's generally how we would describe someone as having cancer. A benign tumour is a tumour that doesn't break up for other reasons that are quite complex, which means it stays localised. It stays in one place. Now, that can still be really bad, because if that one place, say, is in the brain, if you've got a brain tumour, if it's pressing on and disrupting the brain, that could kill you. If it's in a vital organ like the liver or something, it could do enough damage in the liver that you would die of liver failure. But it's the malignant ones where the cells can spread and give lots of secondary tumours that are the really worrying ones, because they can cause cancers all over the body. Okay, let's look at the causes and risk factors behind cancer then, because it has become a very common thing. I think it's 1 in 3 people will get cancer in there at some point in their lifetime. So let's look at the main causes and risk factors that you can try and avoid to minimize your risk of getting it. But it's basically anything that can cause mutation to the DNA, because it has to be a mutation in those oncogenes to lead to cancer. So the main things that can do that is ionizing radiation. That's even ultraviolet radiation in sunlight. That's why it's really important to use sun creams and sunblock. Don't go in the shade too much. People who go out in the sunshine a lot are far more likely to get skin cancers, because the UV radiation, which is one example of ionizing radiation, can cause cancers. Of course, the types of radiation you see in films, like gamma radiation, they're far worse. So when the guy who turns into the Incredible Hulk got hit by gamma radiation, that would cause mutations and cancers throughout the body that would have killed him. It wouldn't have turned him into the Incredible Hulk. Okay. Second one, chemical carcinogens. Now, we talked about carcinogens, and we mentioned them on one of the first slides. Carcinogens are just chemicals that cause mutations within your cells. And there's lots of carcinogens. There's many in cigarette smoke, but you get chemical carcinogens in loads and loads of things. It's impossible to try and avoid them all, but there's some key places like cigarette smoke. It's why smoking is so closely associated with lung cancer, larynx cancer, throat cancer, mouth cancer, all of those kind of things. Okay. Some infections can also be a risk factor for cancer. For example, the papilloma virus is heavily associated with cervical cancer. Papilloma virus is known as a sexually transmitted infection. And if it's caught and infects in the cervix, it can mutate cells in the cervix and cause cervical cancer, which is a very serious cancer among women, which is why in the UK we have a vaccination program where girls get vaccinated against papilloma, the HPV, human papilloma virus vaccine, to try and minimize the risk of cervical cancer. The other one that's here that's a risk factor, you can just have a genetic predisposition to getting cancer. What I mean with predisposition is you're just genetically more likely to get cancer than some other people. This just depends on the type of oncogenes that you have. Some oncogenes seem to mutate more easily than others. Some control factors in your cells seem to trigger oncogenes to be overactivated more than others. So you could just be genetically unlucky that you're more likely to be affected by UV radiation or carcinogens than other people. But it's another risk factor. Let's try and look on the brighter side a little bit here. And let's talk about the treatments, because cancer treatments have come on so much in the last 30 or 40 years. I read a statistic only about a year ago that if you're diagnosed with cancer, you're now more likely to survive than die. That's an incredible thing. That cancer, it used to be you got cancer, you're probably going to die. Now you're more likely to survive it thanks to the advances in treatments. So the first one, surgical removal. If there's a tumor, if there's a big lump of cells, find it, cut it out, remove it, get rid of those cells. That's a really key bit. Chemotherapy or drug treatment is your second option. Chemical, meaning chemical treatment, it's drugs. It's using targeted drugs, and there's loads of really clever ways that they can specifically target a drug to hit cancer cells only and kill those cancer cells. So chemotherapy is really good. Radiotherapy, which is blasting the cells with radiation to kill them. Between these three treatments, success rates of curing someone with cancer now are really, really high. Take a screenshot of this one. This is the last kind of information dump that you need to have from this. Huge amounts of information in this presentation. Just make sure you know it all. So between these two videos, the non-communicable disease 1 and 2, it's a lot of information just thrown at you. From here, though, you now need to go on to the other type of disease, which is communicable disease, which are diseases that can be passed on. So head to this one next, disease 3, communicable disease, where we'll look at pathogens, which are the cause of those diseases, and how those diseases are passed on through disease transmission. As always, please do subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. It really does help me to build more videos, the more subscribers I have. Like this video if you found it useful, and head over to my Facebook channel for any more useful bits of information just to back up the rest of your course. Thank you.